Okay, well, let's stay with our top story. The head of the Wagner group, Yevgeny Prigozhin, is believed to be heading to Belarus as part of a deal to call off his rebellion against Russia. But is that really the last we've heard of him? Well, let's get some analysis for you. And joining me now is Michael Bociurkiw, Global Affairs Analyst and Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council. Good to have you with us. I mean, it's quite a shocking day and 24 hours we've seen unfolding in Russia, Michael. How do you think this will impact President Putin within the Kremlin?
Sure. Good to be with you. Well, I guess we can look at it in two ways. One is that this indeed was a genuine coup. It exposed a lot of weaknesses, not only in Russian defenses, Russian intelligence, but also really brought to light vulnerabilities of Mr. Putin. I gotta say, he looked very tired, very desperate in that speech when the attempted coup just happened. And, you know, he looks much more weakened to his own population. Having said that, what we've seen of Kremlin machinations and intrigue in the past, we cannot also dismiss the possibility, Saima, that this was actually an orchestrated event by the Kremlin, perhaps to do some house cleaning of top officials, but also to test the loyalty of people in the military, of other officials. You know, I cannot see Mr. Prigozhin, the head of the Wagner group, riding off into the sunset on a tractor in Belarus or digging potatoes there or heading off into the jungle in Africa somewhere. So it all ended up a little bit too fast and a little bit too tidy for my liking.
Yeah, that's interesting. So what do you think potentially we could be seeing of Yevgeny Prigozhin? He has been sent to Belarus in this deal. Do you think perhaps he's there on standby for President Putin? We have obviously seen incursions into Ukraine from Belarus before.
Right. Yeah, that's a very plausible scenario. Look, Mr. Prigozhin, his men, I believe, are still very loyal to them. He commands a force that is bigger than the militaries of some medium-sized countries in Europe, Belgium, Netherlands, for instance. And don't forget, he commands incredible amount of resources in Africa. It's said that in DRC alone, their annual income from mining is about $1 billion. So this is all very, very useful for Mr. Putin to fund his war machine. But yeah, the border with Belarus, as you know, was very porous. It could still be used for another push against Ukraine. And with Mr. Prigozhin there and his tactics, it's pretty lethal.
And as far as Ukraine is concerned, potential weaknesses, of course, politically and militarily for Russia could be exploited by Ukraine.
Oh, absolutely. I have the sense that the Ukrainians hope that this would last a little longer so they could get their ducks in a row and really exploit this. But it was over very quickly. But having said that, I think they've been doing a very good job in terms of probing the front line, seeing where the weaknesses are. And, the other thing I have to say, and this is coming from the Ukrainians themselves, I was just in London at that Ukraine Reform Conference, and what we heard there from Ukrainians is, if only Western leaders, including the UK, Canada, US, had moved faster to supply Ukraine with what it needs, the fighter jets, the tank, the main battlefield tanks, that sort of thing, we wouldn't be in the position we are right now. This is not, Saima, by any means a local or regional war. This is now a global war that affects every country around the world.
So what next for Ukraine in terms of the war? What do you think they should be looking to try and do, as well as obviously appeal for more resources?
Sure.
Tactically, what would you think would unfold now?
Okay, there's a couple of things that need to be done immediately. When these events started to unfold, Kyiv, Dnipro, Kharkiv were under very heavy missile attacks. Still, there were deaths, there were injuries, there were damage to property. So the West has to move quickly, perhaps even Israel, to help Ukraine protect its skies. And secondly, is to speed up the delivery of weaponry. You know, I've been based in Ukraine since before the start of the war, and I'm hearing anecdotally from members of the armed forces that they're lacking essential things still, tourniquets or sometimes even ammunition. So there's a lot that still can be done, that needs to be done, because I believe, as I've said from the beginning, that if Mr. Putin is not pushed back completely by the Ukrainians with the help of Western aid, weaponry, that Mr. Putin will be doing more terror.
Okay, Michael, just to let you know, we lost you there on your last answer, but let's talk further about President Putin and what he might do. Of course, if he is viewed or sees himself as potentially slightly damaged reputationally within the Kremlin amongst the senior Kremlin officials, do you think we'd likely see him to lash out or then carry out further strikes in Ukraine and worse ones potentially?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we could see a couple of things henceforth. For sure, neutralizing any of his opponents, anybody he doesn't trust. If Mr. Prigozhin did indeed launch this coup on his end, I would be very weary about my life, perhaps a Novichok cocktail, something like that coming his way. But the other thing is, Mr. Putin tends to act like a rat backed into a corner. And when he is in that position, which he is now, he does irrational things, he does dangerous things. So I'm very, very worried, for example, about that Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. It is in occupied Russian hands. We saw what they did to the Kakhovka Dam. He could there, yeah, so.
Yeah, with the Zaporizhzhia, that's exactly what I wanted to ask you about. Of course, there were concerns about it all along, calls by the IAEA falling on deaf ears for a demilitarized zone around it. And now President Zelensky saying that it's been mined. Huge concern about what might unfold as far as the Zaporizhzhia plant is concerned.
Yeah, and also the lack of water to cool the plant because of the explosion at the Kakhovka Dam. So that's very serious. Look, I and a lot of Ukrainians still remember 1986 and the Chernobyl nuclear disaster not far away from Zaporizhzhia, actually. And that was supposedly a mistake, an experiment gone wrong. And with the Russian soldiers on the site of that plant, with Russian nuclear authorities on there, with the Ukrainian staff who are familiar with the plant mostly gone or locked up, we're in a very, very dangerous position right now with that plant. So I hope people who still have leverage over Mr. Putin, China, Mr. Erdogan and Turkey, use this opportunity to put down the red line and say no messing about with that plant, because again, it could have disastrous consequences for millions of people.
So Michael, in terms of Ukraine moving forwards, the counteroffensive we've heard hasn't gone exactly to plan.
Well, if you talk to the Ukrainians, and I've been to press conferences with the defense minister a couple of times, they will tell you everything is going according to plan, that they're executing this counteroffensive on their own watch, that they're not going to be pressured by anyone to move too fast. The other thing the Ukrainians keep on reminding us is they do not employ the same meat grinder approach as the Wagner group or Russian forces. When they are threatened to the extent of massive loss of human life, they will take steps. So, but I think they're just waiting for the right moment. And don't forget, I mean, you may, for example, have those main battle tanks in place, but you also need the rest of the so-called envelope, the fighter jets, to give you air cover. You need the logistics. You need proper bridges. You need all sorts of things to make it happen. So we will see the day when all of that works together, hopefully soon, and that will be a very decisive moment.
Michael Bociurkiw, Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council, and of course, former spokesperson for the OSCE. Thanks very much indeed.
My pleasure.